So today is Parashah VaEtchanan. VaEtchanan, it's the first phrase in Deuteronomy 3, verse 23. And here it says, and I also pleaded. So that's what Etchanan means. We're going to do a little bit of a review to catch us up with the purpose of the book in general. So this portion today, between chapters 3 and chapter 7, it includes, or it actually finishes the first speech. Remember we talked about how the book of Deuteronomy is comprised of different speeches that Moses gave. So this one is the ending of the first speech and the beginning of the main speech. And we're obviously going to get into the details of that. So we're going to see that the main speech has two main themes, two main sections in the main speech. The main speech is going to begin at the end of chapter 4. And we're going to talk about what these two themes are. So I'm giving you an overview first, and then we'll get into the details. So this week we're gonna begin this. The portion today begins the main speech, and next Shabbat we're going to finish out the first section. So the main speech from chapter 4 all the way to 26. Okay, so it has two sections, section 1, section 2 of the main speech. So today, we're going to begin the first section, and next week we're going to end the first section. So 2 weeks for the first section of the main speech. All right? The second section of the main speech, I believe, has 4 portions. That's how long it is, and how important it is. We'll get there. I'm going to repeat now the summary of the book that we went over last week. I added a couple of things because of now I understand even better the book. So I left a section there apart that this week with my studying this week. Now I understand a little better. So we said last week that the book of Deuteronomy, which in Hebrew is called what? Devarim, which means words, which we saw that it actually means speeches, right? So the book of Devarim is an exposition of the commandment, the Chukim, and the Mishpatim of the covenant renewal. Now that's a mouthful right there. Let's take it apart. Number 1, the covenant renewal. So this book is made out of speeches giving instruction to renew the covenant, giving commandments to renew. The covenant of Sinai, they were supposed to now renew it when they went into the promised land. So that's the big overview of it. And the way to prepare Israel for that renewal of the covenant was to give them commandments. There are 3 types of commandments here. The Chukim and the Mishpatim. We've studied these. We can go back online and learn what it all means, but I'm going to tell you the short version of them. The word Chukim, we usually find it translated in English as the statutes. These are the statutes. And Mishpatim usually is translated the ordinances. So these are the statutes and the ordinances. And we read them, and we have no idea what they mean, and we just keep on reading. As long as you don't bother me, and I don't bother you, we have this little unspoken agreement that you don't know what it means, I don't know what it means, we're just not going to talk about it, and we're not going to make each other feel bad about it, right? So, great. That's how we read the Torah. Well, you know me well by now. You know that's not me. I like to step into the difficult parts. So the word chukim, it means, and we're going to see it through as we study. We're going to see it in more detail. These are commandments that have to do with worship and how to worship God properly, how to worship Him according to the customs that He has revealed in the Torah, not according to the customs of the nations. This is important, and we're going to see it over and over again. The word chukim is also translated as customs. We see it in some versions, they translate it as customs. So we're not to follow the customs of the nations, but the customs that the Lord has revealed in the Torah. The word mishpatim literally means judgments. And we know this. These are the commandments given specifically to the judges of Israel, so that they can issue decisions that are compassionate to the people who are oppressed. So these are the chukim, commandments about proper worship, and the mishpatim, commandments about how to be compassionate to other people, right? All right. We'll get into a lot more detail in those two categories when we cover the main speech. They are all about these two. So, let me try it again. Devarim, Deuteronomy, is an exposition of the commandment, the chukim, and the mishpatim of the covenant renewal. Now, last week, I didn't include this little phrase, the first phrase where it says, the commandment. It's an exposition of the commandment. Today, we're going to talk about this particular commandment. Notice it is in the singular. It is the commandment. And we're going to highlight this in the Torah today. It's going to be amazing. So to finish out this statement, we say that Deuteronomy is an exposition of the commandment, the chukim, and the mishpatim of the covenant renewal to be followed, right, to be observed upon conquering the land with exhortations, blessings, and curses, as well as prophesied failure and promised restoration. Woo! There's a lot there for the mind. Let's do that one again. Deuteronomy is an exposition of the commandment, the chukim, the mishpatim of the covenant renewal. So far, so good. But it also contains, the commandments that are to be followed after Israel conquered the land, right? And Moses adds exhortations to follow the commandments. He adds blessings and curses, or we should say the Lord adds blessings and curses, and a very interesting prophecy that Israel is going to fail at this covenant, but that God is going to restore them. All right. With this little introduction and reminder, we're going to do this again probably next week in a few weeks as we get used to the overall understanding of the book. Now we're ready to get into the details. So we're going to start with chapter 3, verse 23. We have it on the screen. I hope it's big enough. If it's not, I can make it big real quick. No problem. Just let me know.
Can you make it bigger?
Bigger? Okay. Bigger is better. Right? Would that help?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So this is about verse by verse here. All right. So we're going to move quickly, and we're going to skip to the areas that are highlighted, and then we're going to make some comments about them. All right. So we begin with, I also pleaded with the Lord at that time. At what time is he referring to? This is speaking of Moses when the Lord said, you can't go and you can't enter the land. Okay, so when the Lord spoke to him about this, he pleaded with the Lord. And look what he says. He said, let me see the fair land. That's the gist of what Moses is asking. Let me see the land. I pleaded with the Lord and I said to him, let me see the land. And the Lord said, enough. Speak to me no more of this matter. Go up to the top of Pisgah, the mountain where the Lord had told them, and see it with your eyes. But charge Joshua, for he shall go across the Jordan, and he will give them as an inheritance the land. This is important to understand that this passage, this little section here, is not about Moses. It's not about Moses being denied or Moses being punished. It's not even about Moses pleading. This is about the land. It's all about the land. And it is an example for Israel that even Moses will suffer consequences if he does not walk according to the word of the Lord. So even Moses forfeited his enjoyment of the land. And Israel would too, if they do not follow the Lord according to his commands. That's the gist of this little section here. That is why Moses is bringing this in. He's not being narcissistic. He's not just writing about himself, inserting himself into the story. No, he's using it as a theological argument for them, as an example for them. All right, now we go into chapter 4. Chapter 4 is amazing. Chapter 4 is basically a summary of the whole book.
Amen.
You find everything that the whole book has, you find it in chapter 4. Okay? And Moses is almost like he's chasing rabbit trails before getting into the main speech. But we know he's not chasing anything. He is exhorting. Remember, I said that the covenant comes with exhortations, right? These are the exhortations. Moses is pleading with them. And he's going to go into this whole chapter speaking to them why you should obey the covenant. All right, he says, verse 1. Now, O Israel, listen. What does that sound like? Shema Israel, right? Hear, O Israel. So now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and the judgment. What are these? The Chukim and the Mishpatim. These are he is preparing for the main speech. We're not finished with the first speech, but he's getting us ready for it. So listen to the statutes and the judgment which I am teaching you to perform. Verse 3. Your eyes have seen what the Lord has done in the case of Baal Peor. Remember Baal Peor? Yes. Remember what happened there? The Moabite king, Balak, he couldn't get Balaam to curse Israel. So he found a different way. So he enticed them to come and worship their idols. Yes. What is this book all about? What are the Chukim all about? Do not worship me according to the statutes, to the customs of the nations, of the Moabites and everybody else. That is why Moses is including this story here. Remember, Deuteronomy is not a review of the whole Torah. There are tons of stories we don't find in Deuteronomy. The ones that we do are very carefully chosen for theological purposes, to teach Israel, to teach about the Chukim and the Mishpatim, the way of worshiping God according to his statutes. That's why he mentions Baal Peor. So the Lord your God has destroyed them. So this is an illustration of disobeying the Lord's Chukim, the Lord's statutes. Verse 4. But you who held fast to the Lord your God are alive today. These are the curses, the blessings and the curses for obeying the statutes. Verse 5. I have taught you statutes and judgments, as the Lord my God commanded me. When did the Lord command him to teach the statutes and the judgments? We're going to see it. It's very important. Verse 6. So keep and do them, For that is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples who will hear all these statutes. Friends, these are the Gentiles.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, exactly right.
Israel was supposed to teach the statutes. Not only were they supposed to say, I'm sorry, Moabites, we can't worship your way. No, they were supposed to say, oh, well, listen, come here. Let me teach you who the real God is and how to worship Him.
Yes.
That's what they did with Ruth, who was from Moab. That's exactly how this was supposed to work.
Amen.
So these nations are going to hear from you. You're going to teach them these statutes, how to really worship the true God. Verse 10. Remember that day you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb. Horeb is another name for Sinai. So remember, so he's going back to the book of Exodus, right? Remember, he brings these stories with very important purposes. So he's saying, remember that you stood up before the Lord at Horeb. Verse 13, he declared to you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform. That is the 10 Commandments.
Amen.
The 10 Commandments.
Amen.
By the way, can you see just down here? Remember, this is my playground, my little toy. See, if I highlight the word commandments, it gives the word davar.
It's one word.
Davar. That's singular, but here's plural. So in the Torah, it actually says the 10 words. The 10 Devarim. The 10 words. That's another name for the 10 Commandments. The 10 words. Okay, verse 14 now. It says, the Lord commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and judgments. Wait a second. The Lord commanded me to teach you the Chukim and the Mishpatim, which I am about to teach you. At that time, he commanded me. At Horeb, when we were all standing before him and he gave us the 10 Commandments, at that time, he gave me the book of Deuteronomy. But I wasn't able to give it to you until 38 years later. That is important. You see, because the first time around, they got close to entering the land. They sent the spies, and Moses was preparing this speech. I am going to teach you the statutes and the judgments so that you can observe them in the land and you will renew this covenant. And they said, no, we're not. So the speech was retrieved. That's why we have the book of Deuteronomy now. Last. You see how that all fits into the chronology? All right, so to teach you the statutes and the judgments that you might perform them in the land, always with the mind you might perform them in the land where you are going over to possess it. Verse 15. So watch yourselves carefully, since you did not see any form on the day the Lord spoke to you at Horeb. What is this talking about? You did not see any form. You didn't see any idols. Idolatry. This is number one in terms of the statute, the Chukim. This is how you worship me. No idols. That's why Moses is bringing this here. He's preparing them to teach them the Chukim. How to worship God. The number one, no idols. No forms. We skip over a lot. We go to verse 21. And by the way, when you read these, the in-between parts, you'll see how these are the in-between parts that I'm not reading. They're giving details about this. What I'm highlighting are really the main highlights, how to follow the flow of it. Verse 21. Now the Lord was angry with me on your account and swore I would not enter the good land. What is up with Moses? He wants to get into this story again and again and again. Why is he doing that? He's reminding them again and again and again. I was not able to enter. You wouldn't either. So learn from me. Learn from me. Verse 22. But you shall cross and take possession of this good land. So watch yourselves, that you do not forget the covenant and make for yourselves a graven image. You see? Here you go. You see no form. He's beginning to teach them the statutes, the hukim. Here's how you worship me. Do not make an idol. Verse 25. You see how all of chapter 4 really, it's like he can't help himself. He wants to so much teach the hukim, the statutes. But he's not even started yet. Right? He's giving the illustrations before starting the sermon. Verse 25, it says, when you become a father and have remained long in the land and act corruptly and make an idol. Now, I want to point out this. Look at the word when. The word when down here is the word ki. Ki in Hebrew. If he wanted to say, if you become a father and you worship idols, this will happen. If he wants to say if, he would have used the word im. Im, I am. But he used the word ki, meaning when. You are going to. He is giving them a prophecy. You are going to make an idol. I know it. God knows it. Ahead of time. Now watch this. See, verse 26. You will surely perish quickly from the land. When you do that, you will be destroyed from the land. Verse 27. The Lord will scatter you among the peoples. That's what's going to happen. Verse 28. There you will serve gods. Because of the chukim, you want to worship idols? I'm going to make you worship idols. I'm going to send you in the nations where you're going to learn their customs. And you're going to have enough of it. And look what's going to happen. I want you to watch this. This is really amazing. It says, but from there you will seek the Lord your God. Verse 30. When you are in distress and all these things have come upon you, when I've thrown you out of the land, you're dispersed among all the nations. Watch this, verse 30. When you are in distress and all these things have come upon you in the latter days. This is a prophecy for the end times. For right now. Is this amazing or what? In the latter days. Amazing. You see, that's why chapter 4 it's the summary of the whole book, because he will go back to it at the end of the book and give them this prophecy in extensive detail. In the latter days, you will return to the Lord your God and listen to his voice. Listen to his voice. 32. Ask now concerning the former days, from one end of the heavens to the other. So all around the world, from one end of the heavens, all throughout time, space and time. It says, ask now, has anything been done like this great thing? What great thing is he talking about? Watch. Has any people heard the voice of God? As a people, together. Never. Never. Only one people. Look. Or has any God tried to go to take for himself a nation from within another nation by trials, by signs and wonders, and by war, and by a mighty hand, and by an outstretched arm, and by great terrors? He's going into details after detail after detail. What is he saying to them? What is he saying to them? Has anything like this happened before? Has any God done this? What is he saying? Here's what he's saying. To you it was shown that you might know that the Lord, he is God. There is no other beside him. This was not to pump Israel up. This was to pump the Lord up. It's not about you. It's about Him. Why is He saying this? Why is He doing this? Here's what He's doing. He is saying the Lord has no equal.
None.
Therefore, worship Him alone. Follow His customs. Worship Him according to His commandments. Everything continues to support the one thing that He has. The Chukim and the Mishpatim. Here's the right way to worship God. It is amazing just to be able to understand it. What a privilege that we have. Verse 39, it's getting ready to wind down chapter 4. It says, know therefore today, there is no other. Still speaking the same subject, right? So you shall keep His statutes and His commandments. That you may live long on the land. All right. That is the end of the first speech. Great ending. How do we know that's the end of the first speech? Watch this. Verse 41. Then Moses, he's speaking third person now. The speech stopped. He didn't say, then I, third person. Then he, Moses, he himself is writing it, but in third person. So now this is narrative. It's very short, but he's making a point. The book ended the first speech. So he says, then Moses set apart 3 cities across the Jordan, and we're told where they were and what the names of the cities were. Apparently Moses kind of had a little blank, and he wrote about some cities. It's like, Moses, what does it have to do with anything with this? You were talking about worshiping God and all this, and why are you talking about these 3 cities? Makes no sense. Well, watch this. In order, the cities that are here listed are cities that were conquered before they crossed the Jordan. They defeated the kings Og and Sihon. The Lord went ahead of them. Remember these kings from last week? They were giants. And 38 years before, Israel was so afraid of the giants that they said, no thank, we're not going into that land. But the Lord said, I am going to go ahead of you. I'm going to take care of these giants. You're going to conquer their land. And when you live in their land, do not worship me according to their statutes. So for Israel, for Moses to even mention these cities, for Israel to have possession of these cities, there's a lot implied here. A lot implied of what the Lord has done and how they're supposed to live in that land. Supposed to live according to His statutes. Amen. Worship Him according to His statutes. Amen. Not the statutes of these nations. Amen. So an apparent out of the blue mention of these cities still actually is connected, very much connected to the purpose of why He's writing.
Amen.
So that ends the first speech. Now he's going to start the main speech. Notice that he begins the main speech with another narrative. He doesn't go straight into the speech. It says, now this is the law which Moses, third person, still narrative, the law which Moses said before the sons of Israel. Real quick, let me tell you this in Hebrew. Vezod HaTorah Asher San Moshe Lifnei Bnei Israel. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
Vezod HaTorah. We're going to sing that in a little bit. This is what we sing during the Torah service. This is where it comes from. It's exactly, see, now this is the law, the Torah, which Moses set before the children of Israel. The other part comes from another verse. So we'll see that another time. Verse 45. These are the testimonies and the statutes and the ordinances which Moses spoke to the sons of Israel. Wait a second. We haven't heard this word testimony here. We've heard of the statutes and the ordinances, but where do these testimonies come from? Where did that come from? Well, let me show you real quick. Let me switch over here. Let me make this a little bigger. Exodus 31:18, it says, when he had finished speaking with him upon Mount Sinai, God, gave Moses the 2 tablets of the what? The testimonies. The tablets of the testimonies refers to the 10 commandments. So we go back here. Verse 45, these are the testimonies and the statutes and the ordinances. He was just talking about being at Sinai, wasn't he? And in chapter 5, you and I know, he's going to give the 10 commandments again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So now he's beginning to introduce the 10 commandments. But I want you to watch this even further. Now that we know that these are the testimonies, I forgot to read Joshua 4:16. It says, command the priests to carry the ark of the testimony, because the 10 commandments were inside the ark. Right? Now watch this. Here's David, Psalm 119. How blessed are those who observe his testimonies. Now you know what this is talking about. Verse 22. Take away reproach and contempt from me, for I observe your 10 commandments. Your 10 commandments are also are my delights. They are my counselors. I will also speak of your 10 commandments before kings, and shall not be ashamed. I considered my ways and turned my feet my feet to your 10 commandments. And we can keep going on and on and on. Fantastic, great study.
Amen.
Beautiful.
Amen.
All right, we'll keep going. We have very short time. All right, so again, these are the testimonies and the statutes and the ordinances which Moses spoke to the sons of Israel in the land of Sihon. Verse 47, they took possession of his land and the land of Og. These 2 kings. We just talked about what that means, to take possession of their land. Now we begin chapter 5. Again, still introducing the main speech. It says, then Moses summoned all Israel and said to them, and now he goes into the speech. This is the beginning of the speech. It's the main speech. He says, hear, O Israel, Shema Israel, the statutes and the ordinances, which I am speaking today in your hearing, that you may learn them and observe them carefully. The Lord our God made a covenant with us at Horeb. The Lord did not make this covenant with our fathers, but with us, with all those of us alive here today. Every generation is supposed to consider themselves as if they themselves were personally at Sinai, because God considers them that way. Amazing implications of this. The Lord spoke to you face to face at the mountain from the midst of the fire, and he said, we jump to verse 7, you shall have no other gods before me.
Amen.
The Chukim. You shall not make for yourself an idol. The Chukim. You shall not worship them or serve them. The Chukim. Verse 11. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. The Chukim. Verse 12. Observe the Shabbat, the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. The Chukim. This is how you worship me. You shall remember that you were a slave, and the Lord your God brought you out. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to observe the Sabbath. Amen. Verse 16. Honor your father and your mother. How is this the Chukim? Because these are the authority. The authorities before over you, and they represent God. So this is still how you revere the Lord. Then we have, you shall not murder, commit adultery, steal. These things are punished by the earthly courts. So the second half of the 10 Commandments are actually the mishpatim, the judgments, the civil law. You don't get, well, let me not chase any rabbit trails. We don't have time. Verse 22. These words the Lord spoke to all your assembly at the mountain from the midst of the fire. Verse 27. And the Lord says, go near and hear all that the Lord our God says. Then speak, no, I'm sorry. This is Israel speaking to Moses. You go near and hear all that the Lord our God says. Then speak to us all that the Lord our God speaks to you, and we will hear and do it. Verse 28. The Lord heard the voice of your words, what you just said, when you spoke to me. Verse 29. Oh, the Lord says, all that they have such a heart in them. The Lord is saying, I know you're not going to do it. I know you're not. I wish you did, but I know you're not. I already gave you a prophecy about it, didn't I? So that they would fear me and keep all my commandments always. And then the Lord says, go say to them, return to your tents. Right? Verse 31. But as for you, Moses, stand here with me, stand here by me, that I may speak to you all the commandments and the statutes, all the chukim, the mishpatim, statutes and the judgment, which you shall teach them, that they may observe them in the land. Again, this is the book of Deuteronomy. The Lord gave them the 10 commandments. They said, don't speak to us. He said, okay, fine, I'll speak to Moses. The Lord spoke to Moses the book of Deuteronomy, the Hukim and the Mishpatim, to give to them when they were about to cross the land. But they said no, so this book had to wait 38 years.
Wow.
And now we have it. Again, reinforcing the chronology that we already saw. Verse 33. You shall walk in all the way which the Lord your God has commanded you, that you may live, and that it may be well with you, and that you may prolong your days in the land. This is how you live in the land. Now we get to chapter 6. It says, now this is the commandment. Pause right there. We're going to end here in these few verses. We have a couple of minutes. Pause right there. Verse 1, chapter 6. Now this is the commandment. Remember I told you about that? What is this, the commandment? What can be so important? Well, watch this. This is the commandment, the statutes and the judgments which the Lord your God has commanded me to teach you, that you might do them in the land. Verse 2. So that you and your son and your grandson might fear the Lord your God, to keep all his statutes and commandments which I command you. And verse 3, O Israel, you should listen and be careful to do it, that it may be well with you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. Verse 4, what is this? Finally the Shema. Finally we get to the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Is that a commandment? Commandment is hear. Watch this, verse 5. You shall love the Lord.
Amen.
You shall love the Lord. Amen. With all your heart, with all your mind, with all your the strength, we know that. Look at this, verse 6. These words, this is the title of this book, these words, these speeches, this main speech, these chukim, these commandments that I'm giving you, shall be on your heart. You shall teach them. You shall talk of them. You shall bind them. They shall be as frontals. You shall write them. Saturate yourself with these words. And it shall come about when the Lord your God brings you into the land, and you eat and are satisfied, then watch yourself. Do not forget the Lord, who brought you from the land of Egypt, from the slavery. You shall not follow their gods, and any of the gods of the peoples who surround you. The chukim. Back to it, again and again and again. Watch this. But when the Pharisees heard that Yeshua had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered themselves together. One of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him. What was he testing him about?
The commandment.
It says, teacher, which is the great commandment in all of the law of the Torah? Which one is the commandment? Teacher, do you really know Deuteronomy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said to him, Shema Israel, you shall love. That is the commandment. You shall love. Love the Lord your God with everything. This is the great and foremost commandment. This is the commandment of Deuteronomy.
Amen.
The second, he gave it, I'll give you another one for free.
For free. Yeah.
Why? Because
Yes.
love the Lord your God is the chukim.
Yes.
But he needs to give you the mishpatim. You see, the first commandment is worship God. How to worship God. That's the chukim. But there's also the mishpatim. How to be compassionate with other people. So you need to love people.
That's right. That's right. You've got to love people.
Is this beautiful or what?
Yeah.
What a feast in the world. Right?
Hallelujah.